All right, there's a story unfolding right now at gas stations all over the world, and it all comes down to a single number. We're talking about a sudden, really sharp spike in oil prices. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why your fill-up is costing more and what this all means for the global economy.
Yeah, I'm guessing you've probably felt this already. You pull into the gas station, you glance up at that big sign, and the numbers, they just keep climbing, right? Well, it's not your imagination. What you're seeing is the real-world impact of a huge shift in the global energy market.
And here's the number that's at the very heart of this story: $100. For the first time since 2022, oil has blasted past this really critical mark. And look, this isn't just another market fluctuation. It's a major financial and, maybe more importantly, a psychological threshold that's been crossed. Okay, so let's dive into this. The $100 shock. You know, a psychological barrier has been broken for the first time since 2022. That price point, it's a huge deal. When oil crosses $100, it just triggers all these concerns about inflation, it puts a real squeeze on family budgets, and honestly, it sends this ripple of anxiety through the entire global economy.
And get this, it's not like it just squeaked over the line either. Both the big ones, the international benchmark Brent crude and the U.S. benchmark WTI, have shot past $108 a barrel. In some of the overnight trading, prices were even flirting with $120. That just shows you how volatile and uncertain things are right now.
So, this brings us to the big question. Why are prices spiking? What's the source of all this anxiety in the market? A jump this fast, this steep, it's not random. Let's trace it back to the source.
The main reason, the primary driver, is a regional conflict that involves Iran. But this is super important. This isn't just some political headline you scroll past. It's having a direct, physical impact on how oil moves around the planet, because it's disrupting major supply routes that, well, the whole world depends on.
And that brings us to a specific spot on the map, a critical choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Seriously, think of it like a massive superhighway just for oil tankers. It's this incredibly narrow strip of water, but a huge chunk of the world's oil supply has to pass through it. There's no other way.
So here's the problem. Because of all the security risks tied to the conflict, shipping companies are facing a tough choice, and many of them are deciding to just avoid the strait completely. And what that does is it slows everything down, it makes energy transport way harder, and it's basically squeezing the global supply of oil.
Okay, let's talk about the disruption of scale. To really get a grip on the impact, we need to look at just how big this disruption is. I mean, this is not a minor hiccup. And when you put it in a historical context, wow, it really shows you how serious this is.
So for more than a week now, analysts are saying that roughly 20% of the world's oil supply has been disrupted. Let that sink in, 20%. That's 1/5 of all the oil moving around the globe. That is an enormous amount to suddenly have up in the air. Now this is where it gets really interesting. When you put it into perspective, a lot of us have heard about the Suez Crisis back in the 1950s, right? I mean, it was a massive historical event. But that disruption, it affected less than 10% of the global supply. What we're seeing right now is more than twice as big. That's just staggering.
Okay, so we've covered the global markets, the history, but let's bring this right back home. What does all this actually mean for your wallet? Well, here it is. In the US, the average price for a gallon of regular gas has jumped from about $3 to around $3.45. And that's happened in just a matter of days. For anyone who drives, that is a fast and very noticeable hit.
And the experts, well, they're sounding the alarm. They're saying this might not be the end of it. The warning is pretty clear. If this geopolitical situation doesn't stabilize, and soon, those prices are probably going to keep on climbing.
Which, of course, leads us to the next logical question. What happens next? Let's take a look at some of the potential responses and what the outlook might be for the near future. All right, so officials are looking at a few key actions they could take. First, they're thinking about financial support to encourage shipping companies to take the risk. Second, there are diplomatic efforts, trying to secure safe passage. And third, the big one, is potentially tapping into those strategic national oil reserves to get more supply into the market, at least temporarily. But here's the reality check. Pretty much all the analysts agree that these are just band-aids. They might soften the blow a little for a short time, but they don't solve the root cause. Nothing really changes until ships can safely get back to their normal routes through that waterway. So this kind of maps out the path we're on. Before all this, we were sitting at around $3 a gallon. Now we're at $3.45. The real worry is the what if.
If this disruption keeps going, the experts think Brent crude could start testing that $120 mark. And if that happens, yeah, we'll be paying even more at the pump.
But okay, let's add a little bit of perspective here. While $3.45 definitely hurts, prices are still below those crazy peaks we saw back in 2022. Remember when the national average actually went over $5 a gallon for a bit? So yeah, this is serious, but we have seen worse, and pretty recently.
So looking ahead, what are the key factors to watch? The number one concern, the thing that keeps analysts up at night, is if this conflict spreads. If it starts to mess with oil production in the other big players in the neighborhood. We're talking Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, and of course Saudi Arabia. Well, any disruption there would put a whole other level of crazy strain on a global supply that's already stretched thin.
And all of this leaves us with one final and I think really crucial question to think about. How much can one single waterway really sway the entire global economy?